Hey, fourth grade, it's Mrs. LaCourse. Welcome to your online art class. We are going to be doing a project that has to do with Zentangling. And Zentangling is definition, the method of an easy to learn, relaxing, and fun way to create beautiful images by drawing structured patterns. Um, they are pretty much just, as you can see with your packet that you got, just designs that you can copy and add to your own artwork. So it's really supposed to be as relaxing as possible. If you make a mistake, you're supposed to just go with it. So the materials that were provided to you was a turtle, a blank piece of paper, the packet, and the gel pen. Please, if you can, this gel pen here, if you can return it to me, that would be fantastic because they are something that I don't like to replace every year. I like to get other materials rather than just those, but be gentle with them anyway because the tips are felt point. So if you press down too hard, which they're not supposed to be pressed down hard with, but if you press down too hard, the tip will bend and then a lot of ink will come out rather than the normal amount that you'd get from this gel pen. So most of these patterns, if you want to practice them on a different piece of paper, not the blank paper that I gave you because that's going to be for something else, but if you have scrap paper lying around, whatever, if you want to practice the pattern before doing it, then do that. Sorry, Mr. Mitchell came to the door. Hi, Mr. Mitchell.
Hello, just walking through.
It's fine. So if you want to practice something, go for it before you put it on there. But the general idea of Zentangling is that you don't start with pencil. You just go with the pen, and you just as life, when mistakes happen, you just go with it and you learn from it. So also, most of the patterns here can be made into a grid to figure out how to do them. So if you look at this one specifically right here, you can see that it's cut into grids like that. And then each pattern is within this little square, and that's how that happens. So if you split, if you look at them and you can see like that's a grid and this is a grid, you can separate your paper that way first, and then you can easily or more easily figure out how the pattern works and go from there. So you've got this page right here. If you see that all these little lines here, those ones are separating patterns. So you can either restart a pattern within that space. Bye, Mr. Mitchell. You can either restart a pattern within that space, or you can repeat a pattern, but that pattern, the main pattern, stays within there. So for example, this is one that I had done. So this is a way where you can actually take your Zentangling. There are two different ways. So before I even get into that, there are two different ways that you can do it. You can do it where you have more realistic. So what I did for this one is I started with a drawing of the sea turtle. Then I separated my spaces into natural looking areas. So if you've ever seen a sea turtle, they've got like some circular padding looking type shapes on this interior part of their fin. So that's why I separated with this line right here, as you can see, so that I could do this pattern in there. And then with the shell, obviously the shell has all those natural breakups anyway. And then with the head, a lot of them have like little spotted areas. So if you look really close with this, you can see that, there's one spotted area and there's another spotted area. So a lot of this is really just broken down into different sections more naturally. You don't have to do it in the natural pattern, but that's if you want to do a realistic looking type of Zentangle. That's the way I do it. And I also look for patterns that would help the animal, like help it look more realistic. So like for this owl that I had done, most of you had seen me working on this one. The patterns of the feathers, if you look at them, they actually have a feather-like look to them. But those are all Zentangles that I found in your packet that I gave you. And again, with the face, same thing. They're all patterns that I found in the packet that are found in the packet that I gave you. Last one that I had done, not the last one, but the last one I'm going to show you right now, is the lion. And the lion with the mane is where I kind of played around a little bit more. So those aren't really ones that you would see in a mane, but fur is really hard to do for a mane. So I just kind of made it work, but it still looks like a realistic drawing. So that's one direction that you can go with it. So the other direction is more of an abstract or something that doesn't really look like something. Well, sometimes it turns into something that you didn't really expect. So for me, I started with kind of this spiral type of a look up here, and then I just kind of kept going with it. So when you're doing Zentangle, you are looking for patterns that might speak to you, quote unquote, but you're not actually looking for a pattern to fill in a space to make it look like something else. This just ended up happening to look more like a beach scene. So you can see like the starfish pattern here is more of the beach, and then here's like the seaweed and the waves, and this is pebbles, and then there's maybe like a fence here, and maybe a bridge and the sun with the sun rays. I don't know. That kind of turned into something that I wasn't expecting, but that's kind of like the happy side of Zentangle, is that it turns into something that you're not really expecting. But so with this kind of thing, you just block off a space that you're going to end up filling in, and then you split up the space within the space with different patterns. So if you look back to, sorry, I'm getting really close to my lion. If you look back to this pattern, that's what I did to each of these things, is that I split up the space, like these little lines especially, I split the space, and then that's how it changed my pattern. So the last one I'm going to show you, which is what we're going to do after you're finished filling in your turtle, you can either go monogram. So monogram is just a letter, so you can choose any letter that you want to. This one is just my last name, so this is the way that I did it. So really all you do, you start with a pattern, then, oh, maybe I'm going to split it right here because I want to start a new pattern, or maybe that's just where you put your line to begin with, and that's how you just wanted to split it up. And then you just fill in the space as it speaks to you, or as you just decide, like, I'm just going to put a line here and see where I go with that. Anyway, so that's later. So if you look through your packet, there's a whole bunch of different patterns that you can choose from. Like I said, try them out, fill in the spaces within your turtle. And again, don't get upset if you make a mistake. I have made, and you wouldn't even be able to tell because I've turned it into something else, but you wouldn't even be able to tell with the artwork that I've done where I've made the mistake, because I went with it and I made it into something so that it looked like I did it on purpose, kind of a thing. So anyway, let's see if I can tilt this without making my phone fall over. All right. That's really hard to see. So you're going to be using your packet, like I said, to fill in these spaces. So using your pen, and if you'd like to do pencil first, just because you're nervous about it, and then I want you to eventually drop the whole pencil thing and just work with pen. I want you to kind of gain some confidence. That's really what I'm really trying to get you guys to feel, is confidence in what you're doing. So with I'm just going to kind of recreate this pattern here. So this pattern looks, I don't know, if I look at it and I didn't know what I was doing, kind of intimidating almost. But really all it is, if you look at the black specifically, it's just triangles that I brought to the center of the space. So I start like this, and then I turn my paper as I go so that it's all meeting in one point. It's not going to look like anything yet until I start filling this space in. But I want you to take your time in doing this. I don't want you to rush. Zentangling is about taking your time, really just letting your mind go, feeling peaceful rather than stressed out. Now, I know many teachers that have done this before that feel on one end of the spectrum or the other. So I've had people that say, oh, doing this gives me hives, it stresses me out. That's most of the time when you feel like that, it's because you're making yourself reach this expectation of perfection. Those people that I've done this with, or who have done it in the past by themselves, that have done it and they say, oh, it's so relaxing, it's because they take their brain away from what our need of perfection is, and just go with it. So anyway, so now at this point is when I would fill in just the triangles. So I'm just going to do a couple of patterns and then leave you guys to it. You've already seen a couple of my finished products. So this is you're going to end up working on this throughout the next couple of weeks. So when you have your designated art day, I think for Bradford it's Tuesday, and I'm not sure if we even have a schedule for Simon School or if it's just work on it as you go. You're just going to work on this through the next couple of weeks. If you get done this early, like I said, I've given you a blank piece of paper, and on that blank piece of paper, I want you to try one of the 3 different types that I've shown you of your own. So whether you draw an animal of your own, or on your own, not of your own. You could draw one of your own, make up your own animal, whatever, and then break up that space and then fill it with, sorry, you can't even see what I'm doing. Break up that space and fill it with Zentangles. Or do the monogram letter, so whatever letter that you want to, make sure you draw large and use the space, and I would suggest using a pencil to draw your letter in first and then do after that. And then the third option is to do the abstract, where you just draw some sort of a shape. So with this one, it was just, it's just this outline here, and then you split up the space and then you fill that in however you want to with that. But I encourage you to try different patterns, even if they look hard. Try to figure out, it's a lot like math, really. You just have to figure out where the grid starts and how those lines and the details come into play. So yeah, you can start working on this if you haven't already while I'm doing the video, or just turn me off completely and go on your own. I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna do a couple more patterns. I know this one's taking a while, but I'm gonna do a couple more patterns, and just so you can kind of see how this is gonna play out. So if you want to, like I showed you the turtle that I had done, all of the shell is this same pattern, but it's repeated. Now that works well with using this pattern specifically because the pattern is all coming to the center. Ugh, you can't see what I'm doing, I'm so sorry. It's all coming to the center of each part of the shell breakup. However, if I were to do something like this pattern here and repeating that in all of them, or the bubble pattern, it probably wouldn't work out as well. So if you're going to do something where if you put it next to each other within this space, it's going to look exactly the same as the other, rather than looking at this one again, having all of those triangles come to a point and still being able to see the separation of things. Then I would suggest switching up your pattern so it's not just one big massive space of the same thing. And you might get tired of doing that pattern, which is fine. It helps when you're listening to music. Right now it's hard for me to talk and listen to music at the same time. My brain just can't work that way. I'm very hyper focused on whatever I'm doing. So even talking and working like this is somewhat of a challenge for me. But I'm one of those people where, like, even when I was growing up, if I was ever in front of the TV and my parents tried talking to me, it was not selective hearing. I just could not focus. So it's the same thing with music for me. I'm either all in or not at all. And no, I did not grow out of that habit with the TV. My kids or my husband are talking to me and I'm watching TV, it's very hard for me to separate. So anyway, with this gel pen too, just be careful of your hand going in it. It takes a while for it to dry. Especially on the other paper that I give you. This paper here, this is copy paper, so it dries a little quicker. But the paper that I gave you, because it has what's called tooth to it, which if you put it under a microscope, you'd be able to see the little divots that would hold material like ink or chalk pastel. Oh, see? Did you see that? Made a mistake right there. How am I going to fix it? It's going to make it wider. See? You'd never know. This is also with the whole talking thing. Talking and working. Some people can, some people can't. Yeah, so I don't even remember what I was saying at this point. I apologize. Yep, I don't remember. It's gone. Oh, the tooth. So the tooth to the paper. If you look under a microscope, you'd see little divots for things to collect. So, for example, if you're using watercolor paper, it has a lot more tooth to it and absorbency, whereas this is just printer paper, and the printer paper only has to hold ink, and ink doesn't take a lot for it to show and sit nicely on the paper, whereas things like watercolor and chalk pastel and oil pastel, it takes a little bit more for it to need to sit down into something. So you might not be able to see it, but it's there. Okay, so that's one pattern. So if I were to continue that throughout the whole thing, that's totally fine, or you can switch to something new. So something new might be, I don't know, something like this. So with one of these, it's not really a grid, but you can see how it's split up. It starts and ends on the peak of one of the curves, like that. And then you wouldn't see the bottom parts because that goes off the edge. And then I would do this to each one, where I'm just kind of cutting off the point, making kind of like a fingernail almost looking type of shape. And even if there are ones or aren't, let me start that over. Even if there are patterns that you want to try out doing that either maybe you found online or you just want to try something out yourself, you don't have to do what's in the packet. I've made up enough of them myself that, you know, some that, I don't know, I just kind of felt like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, for example, the succession of in the muzzle here, how the dots, because the dots for the whiskers are very prominent on any cat. So the dots just get a little bit larger, and that's how I continued that pattern. So that's not one that I would have found in the booklet. However, totally okay for you to go there and to, you know, go with it. All right, so that's how you'd finish off this pattern here. But then the last part is you'd have to color around there, and you continue, so it'd get a little bit bigger each time and then smaller on each side. It's kind of like a fan or seashell. If you're doing the coloring in, make sure you get as much of the white space as possible, trying to stay within your line spaces. So I'm not going to keep going with that because you don't want to watch me color all of it in, but you'd continue that pattern throughout the whole shell piece, and then maybe you'd move to something else. And then with each of these little ones over here, you can still use each one of these separately, but like maybe this one, like this one's called waves here. See how this one curves in one direction and it curves down in the other direction, and then above, like it goes up and over and then under and over. So if you wanted to do something like that within the space, you can do that. So I would probably outline the square as it has been separated, because it would actually help the pattern. So I'd curve like that, and then the other direction would curve like that, and then back around again. And again, if you don't want to outline, you don't have to, but you know, if it helps, it helps. And then you can continue doing that all the way down. So you can, you know, even keep going this direction, like follow all the way down. And then if that, in that case, you would only have to do the middle part like this. And you just continue all the way down. And then this one like this. This kind of reminds me of what their fins look like as well, with the lines. Anyway, so you'd continue that all the way down, or you can do opposite. So if I were to still do the same pattern, so do it like this, and then the opposite one would be the other direction like that, right? And I'd continue going across. And you're going to go a lot slower than me, right? I'm just trying to go a little quicker so that you're not painfully watching me. So now this one curved this way, so now I'm going to curve opposite. So maybe that's the way you want to do it, if that's the way you decide. Totally no right or wrong in this. You just do as you go. But it gives it a very different look. More of like a reptilian look, I think, actually. And I'll show you the difference as soon as I'm done this part. So you don't necessarily have to look for patterns that look natural within the animal. That's just the way I like to do it. I like to draw a little more realistically. So if you look here, see that looks a little bit more reptilian versus this side, which still does look a reptilian, but it's more of like consistent pattern all the way down, and it would be like one plane. Anyway, so I don't have a completed one of this specifically, but again, this is, you know, the direction that we're going with that, if you'd like to. So then with your blank piece of paper, this one right here, the smaller one that I've gave you, our normal size drawing paper, you can either choose to do the abstract, again, abstract, the realistic, or the monogram. So if you're doing a monogram, all you do is draw your letter. So I'm just going to draw simple, whatever, L. And I always do this part at least, like the outline or the initial drawing I do in pencil first, because that part, I do care personally if I mess that part up. It's the pattern that I don't mind. That's that if I make a mistake, I can usually fix it. So you start with that, and then you can either split now or split as you go, creatively, however you want to do it, like that. And then you'd fill in each of those spaces with a different pattern of Zentangle. Now, see that this space up here is a lot bigger than a lot of other ones. If I decide that, I'm really tired of doing this pattern, I just don't want to do it anymore, there's nothing that says that you can't split that space up, and try a different pattern in the other part. So say I did all of this, I'm like, I don't want to do that pattern anymore, I'm tired of it, I can do a pattern up there. Anyway. So that is that. So like I said, over the next 3 weeks, that's what you're going to be working on. I'd love to see your progress. I'd love to see your final product. So email me at elacourse@kearsarge.org, or you can go on our website and get the email from there. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you had fun with this project, or that you are going to have fun with this project. I miss you guys. It's too quiet here. Take care. Be well. Have fun. Bye.